Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into one of the strangest and most defining scandals in modern political history, the Watergate affair. You might think politics can't possibly keep you awake, but trust me, this one's a labyrinth of paranoia, tape recorders, and bad decisions made by very powerful men who should have gone to bed earlier. And honestly, by the end of it, you probably won't survive this story awake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in Washington, D.C., June 17, 1972. The air is thick, summer-heavy, the kind that smells faintly of pavement and damp newspapers. Inside the Watergate office complex, a sleek modern building of glass and white stone, 5 men move carefully through the corridors, dressed in suits that look a bit too clean for 2 a.m. They carry strange tools, wiretaps, cameras, and bundles of duct tape. Their mission? Break into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee, tucked neatly in this maze of rooms. You can almost hear their shoes scuff on the linoleum floors, the quiet click of the lockpick turning. They move like ghosts, confident but jittery, whispering to each other in the dark. Somewhere, a security guard named Frank Wills notices a piece of tape stuck awkwardly over a door latch, not the kind of thing janitors forget. He removes it. Checks again later. The tape's back. That small sliver of adhesive, barely visible, is the butterfly wing that sets off a hurricane. As police lights flash faintly against the marble walls, you sense how fragile power can be, how easily it trips over its own secrets. The burglars are caught red-handed. They carry cash traced to accounts linked to Nixon's campaign fund. It should have ended there, a small embarrassment in a long election year. But in the halls of the White House, something shifts, a cold ripple of fear. Mainstream fact: the Watergate break-in wasn't the first time Nixon's plumbers had done something shady. Just a year earlier, they'd broken into a psychiatrist's office to dig up dirt on Daniel Ellsberg, the man who leaked the Pentagon Papers. A neat little footnote that suddenly feels prophetic. Now, you imagine the president asleep in the Lincoln bedroom, unaware that the soft hum of the air conditioner carries with it the quiet unraveling of his career. Historians still argue whether Nixon ordered the break-in himself, or whether his aides acted in overzealous loyalty, but what's certain is that he chose the wrong instinct when morning came. Instead of cutting ties, he reached for the cover-up. In the coming days, phones will ring with coded messages, money will move through hidden channels, and the American press will sniff something foul in the air. But for now, you stand in the dim hallway of the Watergate complex, watching flashbulbs pop as the arrested men are led away. It's the end of one quiet night and the start of a storm that will consume an entire presidency. A quirky detail: one of the burglars carried in his pocket a tiny notebook with the number of a White House staffer scribbled inside, a souvenir of recklessness. Another wore surgical gloves, as if the scandal were a patient to be dissected. But no glove could hide fingerprints from history. The next morning, headlines buzz. 5 men arrested in DNC break-in. A small story buried in the Washington Post. But stories, like seeds, have a way of growing in the dark. You sip your imaginary coffee and wonder, if a single piece of tape could bring down a president, what else in history has hinged on something so small? As dawn rises over the Potomac, you walk past the shining domes and flagpoles of Washington, thinking about how silence, once broken, can never be restored. The microphones are everywhere now, not just in the walls, but in the conscience of a nation about to wake up. You wake the next morning to a city that doesn't yet know it's standing at the edge of a landslide. Washington hums the same old tune, typewriters clacking, cars honking along Constitution Avenue, aides hurrying into offices with coffee and folders. But somewhere deep inside the bureaucracy, something smells off. You can sense it in the way certain doors close faster than usual, or how phone conversations end mid-sentence when someone unexpected walks by. The 5 men arrested at Watergate, G. Gordon Liddy, Howard Hunt, and their crew, are linked, little by little, to the committee to re-elect the president. You can almost hear the acronym, CREEP, hanging in the air like a bad joke. The name itself feels like a warning whispered by fate. You trail behind a young FBI agent sorting through cash bundles found in the burglar's pockets, all crisp $100 bills, sequentially numbered, traced back to accounts used by the Nixon campaign. The paper trail glows like a neon sign in the dark. And yet, within the walls of power, the instinct is not to confess, but to conceal. Meetings are held in hushed tones. Orders are passed down without signatures. A handful of men begin building a firewall of lies around the White House. Mainstream historical fact: the plumbers, the same crew behind the Watergate break-in, had originally been formed to stop leaks, not make them. Their mission was to plug the flow of classified information to the press after the Pentagon Papers scandal embarrassed the Nixon administration. Irony is a patient beast, it waits. You drift through a smoky backroom in the old executive office building, where nervous aides chain-smoke cigarettes as they plan what to say to reporters. The air tastes of nicotine and fear. There's talk of national security, of patriotism, of protecting the president. You know, and maybe they do too, that it's really about survival. Historians still argue whether Nixon himself knew about the burglary before it happened, or if he only learned afterward and decided to manage the fallout. But that's almost irrelevant now. The story is bigger than any one man. It's about how secrecy breeds panic, and how panic breeds self-destruction. A quirky tidbit: when the burglars were booked, police found a stack of brand new $100 bills, $2,300 in all, and a miniature address book with the name H. Hunt, W. House scrawled inside. Subtlety clearly wasn't part of the training manual. You wander through a newsroom at the Washington Post, where reporters read the small front-page story about the break-in. It's treated like a minor curiosity, a strange blip in an election year already decided by the numbers. But in a corner desk, two reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, circle phrases with pens, their instincts prickling. Something about it doesn't add up. Outside, the campaign rolls on. Nixon's approval ratings soar. He's framed as the steady hand steering America through chaos. Vietnam, protests, the counterculture. The Watergate arrests fade into background noise, a pebble in the roaring machinery of re-election. You almost start to believe it'll stay that way. But the money trail refuses to die. It snakes through banks in Miami, Washington, and Mexico City, looping back to the very heart of power. Each connection sparks a new question. And questions, once asked, are hard to silence. You picture an aide leaning close to the president in the Oval Office, whispering that everything's under control. Nixon nods, fingers steepled, voice calm but eyes sharp, always calculating. "We'll handle it," he says. But you can sense it, the faint tremor in his confidence, like the first vibration before an earthquake. Outside, America keeps moving, students studying, couples dining, planes lifting from National Airport, unaware that beneath the normal rhythm of democracy, wires are humming with secrets. Somewhere, a reel-to-reel recorder whirs softly, already capturing history in real time. The scandal is still just a rumor, a thin thread in the nation's vast tapestry. But you can tell, deep down, that the thread will not stay pulled for long. The White House looks the same from the outside, marble crisp, flags fluttering in perfect rhythm, but you can feel the temperature drop inside. Each corridor carries the low buzz of denial. Every question from the press meets the same polished response. No involvement, no knowledge, no connection whatsoever. The calm confidence of a government pretending it's not trembling. You imagine the press secretary, Ron Ziegler, facing a wall of flashing cameras, his tie knotted a little too tight. His voice smooth as glass. "This is a third-rate burglary attempt. Nothing more." He says it like a lullaby meant to soothe an anxious nation, and perhaps himself. Behind the podium, though, there's a restlessness. You can almost hear it pulsing in the air vents, hiding behind every official memo stamped confidential. You wander deeper into the West Wing. The carpet muffles footsteps, but not the worry. Aides whisper behind closed doors, sliding folders into locked cabinets. The president's men, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, Dean, shuffle between meetings, their faces pale in fluorescent light. They speak in code now. Containment. Denial. Firewalls. The language of crisis management disguised as routine policy. Mainstream historical fact. Nixon won re-election by a landslide in November 1972, just 5 months after the Watergate break-in. 49 states. The scandal hadn't even nicked his armor yet. For most Americans, the story seemed to vanish, buried under headlines about peace talks and prosperity. But somewhere in that victory speech, you sense a shadow behind the smile. Nixon raises his hands in the familiar V sign, the crowd roars, confetti falls, and yet there's something hollow in his eyes. You can almost hear his inner monologue, the fear that one small leak could drown everything he built. A quirky detail floats up from the archives. During this time, Nixon began installing an automatic taping system in the Oval Office and other key rooms, convinced that recording everything would protect him from misrepresentation. Irony again, setting the very trap that would later snap shut on him. Historians still argue whether this decision came from paranoia or strategy, whether Nixon was haunted by past betrayals or simply obsessed with control. Maybe both. You lean against an invisible doorway and think, power, once tasted, is never fully digested. The official story holds, for now. The burglars plead guilty or stay silent. The White House denies all involvement. Reporters keep asking, but the administration stonewalls. It's like watching a magician shuffle cards after you've already seen the trick. You know what's coming, but you wait anyway, lulled by the performance. You drift through a White House meeting where John Dean calmly assures Nixon that the problem is contained. A faint whiff of cigar smoke curls in the air. The president listens, nods slowly, then leans back in his chair, the leather creaking under the weight of unspoken truth. "We can do this," he mutters. "We control the Justice Department, the FBI, the CIA. We can make this go away." But secrets have a pulse, and this one keeps beating. You can almost feel it echo under the floors, through the cables and phone lines, out into the city beyond. Somewhere in a dim newsroom, a headline is being written that will one day unravel everything said in this room. At night, Nixon walks the halls alone. The White House at 3 a.m. is eerily quiet, portraits watching, clocks ticking, fountains murmuring outside. He stops at a window overlooking the south lawn, his reflection faint and tired. Does he sense it yet, that the cover-up is the real crime? Maybe he does. Or maybe he still believes he can outlast the storm. For now, Washington sleeps again, lulled by official statements and presidential smiles. But you can hear it, faintly, under the sound of sprinklers and rustling trees, the ticking of a countdown clock no one else notices. The scandal hasn't vanished, it's only gone underground, waiting to erupt. And somewhere, in the darkened garage of a DC parking lot, an informant is preparing to whisper 3 immortal words that will define the rest of this story: follow the money. You find yourself back in the hum of the Washington Post newsroom, a place that smells of ink, coffee, and the faint metallic tang of ambition. Phones ring. Typewriters chatter like restless teeth. The overhead lights hum, a bit too bright for midnight work. 2 young reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, sit at adjacent desks, surrounded by stacks of notes, half-drained cups, and that peculiar sense of purpose that only comes when you realize you might be holding the string to something much larger than yourself. Woodward is calm, methodical, the ex-Navy man with a habit of thinking before he speaks. Bernstein, all hair and energy, is the opposite: fast, emotional, a little reckless. Together, they're the perfect storm of curiosity. They begin to tug at that thread from Watergate, the one everyone else forgot about, and slowly, the sweater of the presidency begins to unravel. They start with small details: campaign checks linked to secret accounts, names whispered by nervous sources, anonymous phone calls that end too soon. Each new clue brings them closer, though the picture still feels blurry. But you can feel it, the rhythm of a slow revelation, like water dripping through limestone, shaping truth one drop at a time. Mainstream historical fact. Woodward and Bernstein's reporting on Watergate began as a series of small stories that few editors believed would go anywhere. It took months before their persistence began to connect the burglary to Nixon's re-election campaign. One night, Woodward receives a message: follow the money. The words come from a shadow in the dark, a source who refuses to reveal his identity. Their meetings take place in an underground parking garage, always after midnight, always cloaked in danger and secrecy. You can almost see the vapor of their breath as they talk in whispers, footsteps echoing off concrete walls. A quirky detail: when Woodward wanted to meet his source, he'd place a red flag in a potted plant on his apartment balcony, a quiet signal that set the machinery of history in motion. His source, later known as Deep Throat, would then arrange a time and place. It's espionage theater played out by journalists. Historians still argue whether the phrase, "follow the money," was actually spoken by Deep Throat or invented later by Hollywood. Either way, the sentiment captured the moment perfectly. Truth wasn't hidden in ideology, but in ledgers, transactions, and checks written by invisible hands. You wander alongside them, feeling their exhaustion. Days blur into nights, notes fill drawers, phones are tapped, and their editor, Ben Bradley, keeps reminding them that one wrong word could destroy their credibility. Get two sources. Always two. His voice cuts through the newsroom like a tuning fork. Every time they publish, the White House strikes back. Spokesmen scoff, aides deny, officials sneer. Yet, the cracks widen. Each denial draws more attention. Each attempt at intimidation fuels more questions. Truth, you realize, is strangely stubborn. It doesn't go away just because it's inconvenient. You watch Woodward typing a line that will one day become legend. The money trail leads directly to the committee to re-elect the president. His fingers pause. He exhales. Somewhere in the building, a janitor empties a trash bin, the clatter echoing like punctuation. You drift outside into the cold DC air. The Capitol dome glows faintly under the night sky, serene and unmoved. Beneath it, men in suits shuffle papers, call in favors, make quiet promises. But the story has begun to spread beyond control now. It's in the air, in whispers at dinner parties, in late-night talk shows, in the slow erosion of public trust. You imagine Americans lying in bed, watching the late news, hearing words like cover-up and conspiracy tossed into their living rooms. They don't yet know where it's leading, only that something feels wrong, like a familiar melody suddenly played off-key. In this sleepless city, you can almost feel the heartbeat of democracy stutter, just a little. And in that pause, in that uncertain silence between fact and fear, two reporters keep typing, steady, relentless, chasing ghosts that are about to become history. You follow the echo of footsteps into the cool shadows of a DC parking garage. The air smells faintly of oil and damp concrete, a hidden artery beneath the living city. Overhead, fluorescent lights buzz with a faint electrical hum, flickering now and then, as if nervous about what they're about to witness. You stand a few feet away from a man whose face is half hidden by shadow, the man history will come to know as Deep Throat. Bob Woodward walks toward him, his shoes crunching softly on gravel. His voice is low, almost hesitant, as if words themselves might draw unwanted attention. The man's answers come in riddles, in hints, in warnings. He doesn't confirm, doesn't deny, he guides. Follow the money. Don't believe the official story. The truth is in the cover-up, not the crime. Each sentence drops like a stone into a still pond, rippling outward through the corridors of power. You can almost see their breath in the cold night air. The sound of a car passing above feels distant, ghostly, like thunder underwater. Conversations like this aren't supposed to happen, not between a government insider and a reporter, not when careers and legacies hang by a thread. Yet, here it is, history bending in a dimly lit garage. Mainstream historical fact. Deep Throat's identity remained a mystery for over 30 years. It wasn't until 2005 that Mark Felt, the former associate director of the FBI, revealed himself as Woodward's source, a man torn between loyalty to his bureau and duty to the truth. You walk between the two men as they talk. Felt's voice is calm but weighted by fear. They're obstructing justice, destroying evidence, using agencies to protect themselves. You can sense how dangerous it is for him to speak. One slip, and his career, maybe even his freedom, could evaporate. But he keeps meeting Woodward anyway. Night after night, whisper after whisper. Historians still argue whether Felt's motives were patriotic or personal. Some say he acted out of conscience, others that he was bitter at being passed over for the FBI's top job. Maybe both. In the end, history rarely offers clean answers, only human ones. A quirky detail: Woodward, ever cautious, would sometimes leave his apartment and take roundabout routes, doubling back through alleys, switching cabs, and slipping through hotel lobbies just to avoid being followed. The kind of paranoia that feels theatrical until you remember the government really was watching. Back in the newsroom, Bernstein types up what little they can safely print. Each story feels like threading a needle through fog. Enough to reveal truth, not enough to expose sources. Their editors push them hard. Other papers mock them. The White House calls their work a fantasy. Yet, bit by bit, the fantasy keeps coming true. You wander through the White House halls again. Phones ring more often now. Voices grow sharper. Meetings stretch late into the night. Nixon, pacing, jabs the air with his finger as he talks. "We'll hit back harder," he says. "We'll crush them." The word "them" no longer means just the Democrats. It means the press, the system, anyone outside the circle of loyalty. You can almost feel the paranoia spreading, like a fog that seeps into everything. The president's men, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, Dean, they're all playing defense now. Notes are burned. Conversations move to safe rooms. Instructions are whispered. Somewhere, someone jokes that they should bug the Washington Post next. No one laughs. In the garage, Deep Throat turns to Woodward one last time that night. "They'll try to make you doubt yourself. Don't stop. The truth's in the shadows." He walks away, his footsteps fading into silence, leaving behind only the echo of courage disguised as fear. You stand there for a moment, watching the space between them, the distance where history changes course, where truth stops being abstract and starts becoming dangerous. Above ground, the city sleeps. But beneath it, in this quiet cave of concrete and secrecy, the foundations of power begin to crack. The cover-up grows like a slow-motion avalanche, at first almost graceful in its precision, then unstoppable in its chaos. You're back inside the West Wing, where the air itself feels heavier, carrying the scent of stale coffee, stress, and fear disguised as confidence. Staffers move like actors in a play they didn't audition for, rehearsing denials, memorizing lines that contradict the truth just enough to survive another day. You can almost hear the hum of tape recorders buried in drawers, the scratch of pens over carefully worded memos. National security, executive privilege, ongoing investigation, the magic words of deflection. Nixon's aides are now part-time linguists, bending English until it almost breaks. Every conversation begins with reassurance and ends with quiet dread. Mainstream historical fact. In early 1973, White House counsel John Dean began secretly documenting his conversations with Nixon, realizing that the cover-up had gone from political maneuvering to criminal obstruction of justice. Dean's notes would later become one of the most damning sources of evidence. You sit in the corner of the Oval Office, unseen, as Nixon leans forward over his desk. The lamps cast long shadows over the papers spread before him, lists of who's loyal, who's wavering, who might turn. He speaks softly, almost tenderly, about the need to protect the presidency. The phrase sounds noble, but you know it's just another way to say protect myself. John Dean enters, shoulders tight, face pale. You can feel his hesitation, the weight of every secret he's carrying. "There's a cancer on the presidency," he tells Nixon. The words hang in the air, blunt, terrifying, true. You imagine Nixon's fingers tightening on the armrest. He doesn't shout. He doesn't deny. He just exhales slowly, like a man who's run out of exits but won't admit it yet. Historians still argue whether Nixon genuinely believed the cover-up was justified, that he saw it as political damage control rather than criminal wrongdoing. Perhaps he'd been in power too long to tell the difference. A quirky detail: Nixon kept a list, an enemies list, of reporters, activists, and politicians who'd crossed him. The plan was to use federal agencies to screw them in various creative ways. It sounds cartoonish now, but at the time, it was deadly serious. Power and paranoia make strange bedfellows. Outside the Oval Office, the air feels electric. FBI investigators push harder. Subpoenas begin to fly. The Senate forms a special committee to dig into the mess. The name Watergate has now become shorthand for corruption itself. The public mood shifts, from curiosity to anger, from confusion to betrayal. Inside the White House, shredders hum through the night. Boxes of files disappear into backrooms. Aides resign quietly or are reassigned. Nixon's closest men, Haldeman and Ehrlichman, try to plug the leaks by ordering even more secrecy, more loyalty oaths, more damage control. You almost pity them, like sailors patching a ship that's already halfway underwater. And the tapes, those cursed, automatic, self-incriminating tapes, keep rolling. Each day, they capture a little more of the truth Nixon thinks he can still hide. The soft click of the recorder becomes a metronome for disaster. You drift down the hall into the map room, where Nixon sometimes drinks scotch alone, staring at the old war maps from World War II. You can sense the loneliness pressing down on him, the man who wanted to be remembered as a peacemaker, now trapped in a web of his own making. He mutters to himself, "They'll never get me. Not like this." But his voice trembles on the last word. By now, reporters are circling like hawks. The Washington Post keeps printing. Television news anchors deliver nightly updates, their tone growing darker. The public starts to see through the polished statements, realizing that the president's calm exterior hides a furious storm of deceit. You leave the White House and step into the humid D.C. night. The fountains outside splash softly, indifferent to the unraveling inside those marble walls. Somewhere, a faint radio plays, the latest headline, another resignation, another denial. The country is watching, waiting, holding its collective breath. And you know, deep down, that the walls of power are beginning to close in, one tape at a time. The Senate hearings begin in the spring of 1973, and suddenly, America stops what it's doing to watch. You can almost feel the collective hush across the country, office radios tuned in, living rooms flickering with grainy images of witnesses raising their right hands. In an age before the internet, before 24-hour news cycles, this is as close as television has come to theater. And it's riveting. You take your seat among the invisible audience in the Senate caucus room. Cameras line the back wall. The microphones gleam under the lights. At the center sits Senator Sam Ervin, white-haired, bespectacled, and armed with a southern drawl that sounds gentle until it cuts. He calls it a search for truth, but it feels more like an exorcism. One by one, Nixon's former aides come forward. Some are defiant, others trembling. Each brings a piece of the puzzle, and together they form a portrait of a government at war with itself. You hear phrases like hush money, executive privilege, and national security repeated until they lose meaning. You hear the phrase cancer on the presidency echo once more, this time broadcast into millions of homes. Mainstream historical fact: the Watergate hearings, which aired live across major networks, drew an audience of nearly 80 million Americans, roughly half the nation at the time. It was one of the first major political spectacles of the television age. You notice how the rhythm of the hearings feels hypnotic, the shuffle of papers, the gavel's sharp crack, the murmur of senators conferring in low tones. The witnesses shift in their chairs, sweating under the lights. Every now and then, someone leans too close to the microphone, and their voice comes out like thunder. Then comes John Dean. Calm, meticulous, wearing oversized glasses that magnify his tired eyes. He testifies for days, recounting in chilling detail how the cover-up was organized. The meetings, the payoffs, the conversations with Nixon himself. You can almost hear the air leave the room when he says, "I began to realize that I was becoming part of a criminal conspiracy." Historians still argue whether Dean was acting out of conscience or self-preservation, but his words strike the public like a match in a dark room. The president's men, once invincible, are suddenly just men, flawed, frightened, flailing. A quirky detail floats through the noise. Television networks, unsure how to handle the hearing's length, rotate coverage like a relay race, ABC one day, NBC the next. Viewers adjust their schedules around it. Cafes and diners leave TVs on all day. Even kids come home from school and find their parents glued to the screen. Watergate becomes not just a scandal, but a national ritual of watching. You drift through the corridors outside the hearing room. Reporters scurry to phone booths, dictating stories at full speed. Photographers reload film with shaking hands. Aide after aide passes by, avoiding eye contact, clutching folders close to their chests. The city itself seems to hum with gossip. Back at the White House, the atmosphere curdles. Nixon still insists on his innocence. "I am not a crook," he'll say later, words that will echo for decades. But right now, in 1973, you can feel his defenses cracking. He watches the hearings on TV like everyone else, scowling at familiar faces turned against him. Sometimes he talks back to the screen, muttering, "Lies? All lies." Other times, he just sits in silence, the flickering light painting his face in shades of doubt. In the Senate room, the questioning continues. The truth, slow and steady, is being built like a fragile bridge, each testimony another plank laid down, each denial another crack appearing beneath. You find yourself drifting into the rhythm of it, lulled by repetition and formality, until suddenly, a revelation jolts you awake. A former aide mentions something almost offhand, that the president has tapes, secret recordings of nearly every conversation in the Oval Office. The words hang there for a moment, dismissed by some as rumor. But deep down, everyone knows, this could change everything. You can almost feel the shift in the room, a collective heartbeat skipping. Reporters glance at each other, pens frozen mid-note. A new kind of silence settles, the kind that always comes before thunder. Outside, in the sticky DC summer air, you exhale slowly. The truth is out there now, somewhere between the hum of microphones and the crackle of live broadcast. And the world is listening, holding its breath for the sound of a reel turning, a tape waiting to speak. You wake into the dim, airless heart of the White House. The corridors are quieter now, the laughter gone, the phone lines hot. Outside, the lawns are immaculate, the flag still waves, but inside, a storm brews in whispers and tape reels. It is the summer of 1974. A year has passed since the hearings began, and the secret has grown too heavy to stay hidden. The word, tapes, now echoes through the Capitol like a haunting refrain. Everyone knows they exist, but no one, not even the most loyal aides, knows exactly what they hold. You move through the Oval Office, past the shadows of power and pride. On the president's desk, a small black box sits half-hidden under stacks of papers. It hums faintly, a reel-to-reel recorder, inconspicuous, ordinary, yet capable of undoing an empire. Nixon, weary but still defiant, leans back in his chair. His face is older, drawn tight by sleepless nights and worry. He still believes he can win. He has fought tougher battles before. He has stared down mobs, rivals, nations. But this is different. This is silence closing in. Across the Potomac, in the offices of the special prosecutor, the hunt intensifies. Archibald Cox, and later Leon Jaworski, demand the tapes. Nixon refuses, invoking executive privilege, a president's right to keep his conversations private. The phrase becomes a legal fortress, but cracks begin to show. When the Supreme Court finally rules, United States versus Nixon, the decision is unanimous. Even the justices he appointed vote against him. The tapes must be released. The rule of law, they say, stands above any man, even the president. You can almost feel the weight of that ruling echo through marble halls and courthouse steps, through the nervous laughter of aides who suddenly stop mid-sentence. History has made its demand. Then, the moment arrives. In an office filled with tension and the smell of stale coffee, a technician presses play. The reel spins, the tape crackles, and a voice, unmistakable, tense, deliberate, fills the room. It's Nixon. You listen as he instructs his chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, to order the CIA to block the FBI's investigation. The words are measured, calm, the tone of a man confident in his control. But what he's saying is unmistakable. He's directing the cover-up. This becomes the smoking gun tape. The sound that burns through all denial, all illusion. The proof that the President of the United States, not his aides, not his underlings, orchestrated the obstruction of justice. You imagine the room when it's first heard. The stunned silence. The realization that this is the end. No spin, no strategy, no press release can undo what the tape has revealed. In the following hours, political allies, those who defended him for months, begin to peel away, one by one. Senators who once pledged loyalty now speak of resignation. Party leaders arrive at the White House for a private meeting. They tell Nixon the truth he already knows. If he does not resign, he will be impeached. The walls that once protected him now seem to echo his own voice back at him. He paces. He stares out the window toward the Washington Monument, that distant symbol of permanence. He knows his place in history is sealed, not as the triumphant statesman he imagined, but as the cautionary tale of unchecked power. You close your eyes and hear the faint sound of that reel still spinning, endlessly replaying the words that toppled a presidency. There is something eerie about it. How ordinary it sounds, how bureaucratic. Evil rarely announces itself with thunder, sometimes it whispers through microphones, filed neatly in boxes marked confidential. Outside, the press gathers. Cameras click. The hum of generators fills the humid night. America waits, sleepless, for the next morning, the day the most powerful man in the world will admit defeat. You step outside into the darkness of the White House lawn. The lights are still on in the West Wing. Somewhere inside, a man writes his final speech. Somewhere else, a secretary quietly removes the presidential seal from documents. The silence feels historic, almost sacred. And then, the reel stops turning. The tape ends. And with it, so does an era. You wake to the soft flicker of television static, the pale glow of a nation waiting in suspense. It's August 8, 1974. The White House sits still under a warm summer night, floodlit and fragile, like a ship floating in calm water before the storm. Inside, Richard Nixon prepares to speak to America for the last time as its president. The day has been long and heavy. All across Washington, phones have buzzed with rumors. Senators whisper in hallways, aides pack boxes in silence. The corridors of power smell faintly of cardboard and despair. You can hear the shuffling of feet, the closing of drawers, the quiet choreography of an empire folding in on itself. In the West Wing, Nixon's family gathers behind the scenes. His wife, Pat, sits pale and composed. His daughters stand beside her, trying not to cry. The president straightens his tie in the mirror, forcing a half-smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. He's been rehearsing this moment for hours. The tone, the pacing, the gravity. But how do you rehearse an ending like this? He takes a deep breath and walks to the podium. You imagine yourself standing just beyond the camera lights. The air thick, the silence electric. The red recording light blinks on, and Nixon begins. Good evening. This is the 37th time I have spoken to you from this office, where so many decisions have been made that shaped the history of this nation. His voice is steady, almost calm. You listen as he talks about duty, about putting America first, about the need to heal. There is no direct admission of guilt, no tearful apology, only the measured resignation of a man who knows he has lost the trust of his people. Therefore, he says, pausing, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. There it is. The sentence that shakes the world. For a heartbeat, you can almost hear time stop. The whirring of cameras, the muffled gasp of reporters, the sigh of millions watching from their living rooms. Somewhere in Ohio, a woman lowers her coffee cup. In California, a boy asks his father what resign means. The country listens in stunned silence. After the broadcast, Nixon stands still for a moment. The cameras stop rolling. He exhales slowly, almost relieved, then turns away from the podium. In that instant, the weight seems to lift, the impossible tension of 2 years finally giving way. The next morning, the sun rises softly over the Capitol. The White House lawns glisten with dew. At 9 a.m., Nixon walks out of the West Wing for the last time as president. He's wearing his usual dark suit, his jaw set in that familiar grim line. The staff lines the corridors, many with tears in their eyes. Some reach out to shake his hand, others simply nod, unsure what to say. At the helicopter steps, he turns, raises both arms in his famous V for Victory salute, and smiles, a strange, defiant smile that history will freeze forever. The rotors begin to spin, the noise growing to a roar, and you can almost feel the vibration under your feet as the helicopter lifts off, carrying him away from power, from scandal, from the very center of the world. You follow the helicopter's path as it sweeps low over the city, over the monuments, the rivers, the crowd of reporters craning their necks upward. Inside, Nixon looks down one last time at Washington, D.C., at the city that made him and destroyed him. For a fleeting moment, he is just a man staring at the ruins of his own ambition. Later that day, Gerald Ford takes the oath of office. His first words are gentle but firm. Our long national nightmare is over. You let those words echo. Nightmare. It fits. 2 years of lies, fear, and unraveling faith in government, all distilled into that quiet, almost fatherly reassurance. Yet, even as Ford speaks, you sense the lingering doubt. Has the nightmare truly ended, or has it simply changed form? That night, the White House glows softly under the moonlight. In the private quarters, the Nixon family's rooms stand empty, beds neatly made, the faint smell of aftershave and cigarette smoke still hanging in the air. Somewhere, in a darkened archive room, the tapes remain, silent, waiting, preserved. You stand in the doorway, feeling the chill of history, how it moves not in grand gestures but in sighs, in the quiet sound of footsteps leaving marble floors for the last time. The helicopter's echo fades, leaving only the hum of crickets outside and the soft rustle of leaves on the south lawn. The age of Nixon is over. But the question of what it meant, that will take generations to answer. You wander the corridors of memory, tracing the echo of those 2 years that reshaped Washington. The city has returned to its routines. Office lights flicker on at dawn, taxis roar past the Capitol, the Potomac flows silently toward the Chesapeake. Yet, beneath the rhythm of daily life, the aftershocks of Watergate ripple quietly, like a hidden current that no one can see but everyone feels. You pass journalists in cafes, still scribbling notes, still comparing recollections. Woodward and Bernstein have become icons, the embodiment of persistent curiosity against the machinery of power. Their names are whispered in newsrooms across the country. Editors praise them, critics accuse them of overreach. But history has already begun to write them into legend. Mainstream historical fact. The Watergate scandal led to the indictment of 69 individuals, including 48 convictions. The names of powerful aides, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, Mitchell, now populate court dockets, newspapers, and textbooks. You can almost see the oddities in the details. Liddy's notebooks filled with elaborate security plans, the absurdity of the burglars choosing a high-profile hotel across the street, the bizarre competence with which amateurs stumbled into professional crimes. It's almost comical, if it weren't so consequential. Historians still argue whether Watergate could have happened in the same way in the modern era, with social media, digital surveillance, and 24-hour news cycles. The context feels ancient now, but the lessons remain shockingly current. Power unchecked will almost always test the limits of legality and morality. You drift past the Supreme Court steps, imagining the justices deliberating. The ruling against Nixon becomes a cornerstone, not just a legal precedent, but a symbol of accountability. Even a president is bound by law. You feel the quiet gravity of that realization settle over the city, subtle yet transformative. A quirky tidbit. Nixon was an avid bowler, a hobby that oddly humanized him to the American public in the midst of scandal. It seems almost surreal to think of a man directing cover-ups by day and rolling strikes in a suburban alley by night. You wander into the archival room, where boxes of files and tapes are cataloged, untouched for decades. Each one carries secrets, whispers of decisions, and fragments of conversation frozen in time. The hum of the fluorescent lights seems softer here, almost respectful, as if the building itself knows that these relics carry weight beyond paper and reel. In classrooms, teachers begin to recount the scandal. Students learn of the chain of events that led to a president's resignation, the bravery of reporters, the failures of men in power, the resilience of the law. You hear phrases like checks and balances and rule of law repeated with reverent emphasis. And outside, in the city, life moves on. Children play in parks where protests once gathered. Tourists snap photos of monuments, unaware that a secret war of loyalty, deceit, and revelation once raged in the streets around them. You stand on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, looking out over the reflecting pool. The water is still, a perfect mirror of sky and clouds. You feel the strange serenity that comes after upheaval, the quiet exhale of a nation that has survived both the ambition and the failure of a powerful man. The tapes remain, the reporters remain, the lessons remain. And somewhere in the folds of memory, the faint echo of a voice instructing, whispering, guiding, "Follow the money," lingers. It is both a warning and a guidepost for generations yet to come. You stroll through the empty halls of the White House late at night, imagining the ghosts of the past lingering in the shadows. The smell of polished wood and faint cigar smoke still clings to the carpets. Each step you take is soft, careful, as though you might wake history itself. It feels almost impossible that less than a year ago, this building hummed with tension, secrets, and whispered schemes. Nixon's resignation has passed into the annals of memory, but the consequences ripple endlessly. The people who once surrounded him, aides, advisors, lawyers, have scattered to corners of private life, some quietly disgraced, others facing prosecution. You imagine them waking each day, haunted by the knowledge of what they participated in, forever carrying the fingerprints of a scandal too large to ever truly erase. Mainstream historical fact: Watergate led to sweeping reforms in campaign finance, government transparency, and investigative journalism. The scandal reshaped the relationship between the press, the public, and political power. It became a blueprint for both accountability and caution in American governance. You notice the curious details that make history so human. Nixon, who once claimed he was not a crook, later admitted in interviews that the episode changed him forever. The aides who planned break-ins now live quiet lives, haunted more by embarrassment than imprisonment. Woodward and Bernstein, meanwhile, move forward in fame and influence, their methodology and tenacity taught in journalism schools worldwide. Historians still argue about the psychological profile of Nixon, whether paranoia drove his decisions or ambition. Was it fear, ego, or a deadly combination that led a leader to compromise his oath of office? The debate is endless, compelling, and impossible to resolve entirely. A quirky anecdote: during the investigation, one of the burglars revealed he had been a former minor league baseball player, a fact that amused reporters endlessly and lightened the tension in the most unexpected moments. Even in political catastrophe, there is room for small absurdities. You drift down to the Rose Garden, where the evening air smells of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. The moon reflects off the fountain, and for a moment, the world feels as though it has exhaled. You reflect on the lessons. Vigilance matters, power has limits, and truth, though slow, eventually finds its way to the surface. You realize that Watergate is more than a story of crime and politics. It is a meditation on human frailty, ambition, and resilience. Each whisper, each tape, each testimony, a reminder that history is shaped by choices, both great and small. The past lingers in every shadowed hallway, every archive room, every careful sentence in a newspaper. As you turn away from the White House and look toward the quiet city beyond, you understand that the story is never truly over. Watergate, like all history, is alive in memory, in discussion, in cautionary tales whispered late at night. And as you drift into sleep, you carry the echo of a nation that survived its own mistakes, learning to watch, to question, and to remember. The night stretches long and soft, folding around you like a velvet blanket. The hum of the city outside fades to a gentle murmur, distant traffic, and the occasional call of an owl blending into a lullaby. You feel the tension of decades of scandal slowly releasing, each breath drawing out the weight of history and replacing it with calm reflection. Imagine walking along the south lawn under a silver moon, the fountains whispering quietly as they always have. The grass is damp with dew, and the shadows of the White House stretch long, almost protective, as if the building itself has exhaled. The tapes, the hearings, the resignation, all monumental, yet now distant, like waves receding into memory. You drift through the echoes of conversations, the whispered warnings in parking garages, the click of typewriters, and the quiet determination of reporters typing deep into the night. Each sound softens as you walk further from the noise of events, letting their weight settle into history rather than pressing on your chest. Think of the people who lived it, from the president pacing in the Oval Office to the journalists waiting in cafes, and allow their choices, errors, and courage to fade into stories that teach without frightening. The lessons remain, but the immediacy of fear, tension, and scandal gradually loosens, leaving only a gentle sense of wonder at the fragility and resilience of human systems. As you follow the final echoes of Watergate into the soft night, imagine the moonlight reflecting off the Potomac, quiet and eternal. The city sleeps, the monuments stand witness, and the air hums with a slow, steady rhythm. You can almost hear history whisper, gently, without urgency, and your thoughts drift along with it, lighter now, untangled and ready to rest. The story is over for tonight. Let your mind float, soft and steady, on the gentle currents of reflection, knowing that the lessons of the past can teach, soothe, and guide, if only you listen with patience and care.